Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to the Netherlands for the first time in quite a little while actually, and this is my first sit down Dutch beer review in maybe 3 or 4 months actually. The last one was one of those big imperial pastry stout things from De Hotel, which was really quite nice actually. But for this review we are going to go to a brewery that I've never tried anything from before. These guys are one of the older and more established craft breweries in the Netherlands from what I understand, and this particular beer is a style that is quite in season in the Netherlands at the moment as well, so very curious to see how this one turns out. For this review then we are going to go to one of the islands on the west coast of the Netherlands, Texel, and we're having a look at my very first beer from Texels Bierbrouwerij. This one is called the Texels Bock. It comes in at 7% ABV, and I think you know what style of beer this one is going to be. So it was my good friend Thomas over at Thomas Open that was telling me the Bock beers are very in season in October and November in the Netherlands. So I saw this one in the supermarket. It was a brewery that I'd seen around quite a bit actually, including in the Bierwinkel in Leiden, and I thought, well, you know, let's get one of these and review it here on the channel actually. This could make for a very interesting review. So fingers crossed this is a good beer. I do enjoy the Bocks and the lager beers that you'll get, really kind of nice German style actually. And so hopefully this turns out to be another very nice example of it as well, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So let's see how we get on then. So since this is a Dutch beer, a massive shout out to the guys of the Dutch Craft Beer Collective. That's my good friend Thomas over at Thomas Open. We've also got Remy at Beer Geek Holland, Herben at Dutch Beer Geek, and now we have Douglas over at Beers with Douglas as well. So these four guys, lovely guys, very knowledgeable about different beers, and you will hopefully see them feature on my channel a little bit more over the next little while actually. These guys are doing some very nice videos of their own, so do make sure you check out the Dutch Beer Collective on Instagram and Facebook. I'll try and remember to put that link in the description below, and there you'll find all four of their channels, so make sure you go and subscribe to them, show them some love. Most of them do some English reviews along with the Dutch reviews that they do as well. So yeah, definitely worth checking those guys out, and you will see them on my channel at some point soon, as I said. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery as well before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done or I will do in the future from Texels Bierbrouwerij. This is the very first time I'm tasting a beer from these guys, like I mentioned earlier. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Dutch beers that I've reviewed for you. That's going to be added to quite regularly over the next little while, and hopefully fairly regularly in the future as well. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Texels Bierbrouwerij then, on to my brewery notes. So Texels Bierbrouwerij are based in a little place called Oudeschild, if I'm pronouncing that rightly. Probably not, so do let me know about the pronunciations in the comment section below. But like I said, they're based in a little place called Oudeschild on Texel, which is one of the islands on the west coast of the Netherlands. It's actually the largest of the Wadden Islands, but the company itself was founded back in 1999, but apparently this current incarnation of the company is a continuation of the Texels Bierbrouwerij, which was in operation from 1994 to 1998, and they went bust in that year. But the two companies were based in the same location, which is a farmer dairy. But the new company was founded by Jaap van der Weide, who came from a background in IT and telecoms, and he apparently spent 6 years in Munich, and so he developed a fondness of the traditional German beers, and that explains a lot of the kind of beers that you're going to find from this brewery. But he started the company off brewing in April of 1999. They had a capacity initially of 10 hectolitres, and they also opened up a tasting room very early on as well. But the brewery continued to expand their infrastructure over the following years, and then in 2004 the ownership structure changed, with Jaap van der Weide selling off a good chunk of his share, although maintaining a little bit of it, and then Martin van der Loof, Sef Brakel and Maurits Dix became the main owners. The latter went on to retire from the company in 2017, and that year they also presented presented plans for a new brewery, which they are hoping to build soon. But these guys do have a considerable output at the moment. They've scaled up many times since that initial 10 hectolitres. I couldn't find an exact figure for how much beer they're brewing today, but as I said, you can get these beers fairly readily in different supermarkets around the Netherlands, like Jumbo and things like this. Actually, one thing I learned about the Netherlands though is that it's almost impossible to pay with Visa in the Netherlands for some reason. I had no idea about that, but apparently paying by card is only quite a recent thing there, which I wouldn't have thought. But as of October 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 17 different beers, and like I said, a lot of them are kind of traditional German styles of beer, hence why they've got a Bock beer actually. But these are quite seasonal in the Netherlands, from what Thomas was telling me as well. So I guess you'll probably start to see these beers appear, you know, around kind of September time. Then they'll go into October and November, maybe even right up to Christmas as well actually. But yeah, that was all I was really able to find about Texels Bierbrouwerij for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit about these guys, you can check out the brewery website in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all of those different beers that they've done. So yeah, really curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open up. There you can see the Texels beers are very distinctive because of the big red label that they have. You can see they've got a little top label as well, which is, I think that's a kind of ode to the German breweries actually. You know, this is a very common thing in Germany. I don't remember too many of the Dutch breweries having this, of course, or even the Belgian breweries. Don't think they tend to do it either. But there you can see the Texels bottle cap on this one. It does say Special Beer. I'm probably not pronouncing that because the Dutch accent is something that I haven't really mastered yet, of course, and my Dutch pronunciation in these videos is probably terrible. But yeah, 7% Bock beer, this one, and it tells you a little bit about it on the back. And I find it odd when I read Dutch how much of it I can understand, because it's kind of a weird middle ground between German and the Scandinavian languages. So yeah, there are quite a few things in there that I can understand. There's a lot of similarities actually between the Scandinavian languages and Dutch. So I dare say that if I did move to the Netherlands, that I would maybe pick up the language quite easily, but it would probably take me a while to learn how to spell everything. But there you can see on the top of the bottle, there is the Texels Bierbrouwerij symbol actually, and it's also on the back here as well, which is very nice. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we will get on with the tasting. I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. This is a 330ml bottle incidentally, and like I said, this is one that I just picked up in Thomas's local supermarket in Winschoten in the north of the Netherlands. It's very close to the German border actually. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we will get on with the tasting then. This is quite a dark Bock beer actually. It looks almost like a Doppelbock. So, yeah. I was expecting when they said it was a Bock, it might be a little bit more like a kind of single Maibock, but it certainly looks more like a Doppelbock rather than anything else. But you can see when we poured this beer, it had a nice quarter, 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of beigey head on it, kind of fawn coloured head. That's fading away just to be a very, very thin foamy layer, and it's going to leave a nice little bit of a ring around the edge of the glass there. But you can see one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, but it certainly does look very, very nice. And I would say this is one of the darker Bock beers that I've come across. As I've told you before, when it comes to the colour of your beer, it's all to do with the types of malts that you have in here and also the length of the boil. If you boil the beer for longer, the sugars are going to caramelise more and it will make the beer just that little bit darker. So yeah, if you put some light through this, it does have a nice rich kind of rich, actually very red, kind of chestnutty colour to it. It looks a lot darker when there's no light passing through it. It definitely looks a little bit more kind of like a stained mahogany kind of colour. But yeah, put the light through that and you'll see it's got a nice kind of red chestnutty edge to it. But it certainly looks like a very nice beer, this one. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. I'm very, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So yeah, let's look at it. Oh, that smells pretty nice actually. Yeah, it almost smells a little bit more. It kind of comes across as like a mixture between a Bock and between a Doppelbock and a Dunkel. It almost strikes me as kind of choosing a middle ground, somewhere between those two styles actually. So the story behind the Bock beer was that there was a town in Germany called Einbeck, and they had a slightly different accent from Munich, and then they took their beers, the Bock beers, or the Beck beers, down to Munich, and so the Germans used to, the Münchners, they used to make fun of the Beckers for their accent actually, so they called the beers Bock, and then it just stuck. So these beers originally from Einbeck became known as the Bock beers. So I do need to get to Einbeck at some point and try a few of the original Bocks if they are still in existence. If memory serves me correctly, that town might actually be in the former East. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of those original Bock breweries didn't survive, because that sometimes is the case in the East of Germany. Some of the breweries do survive right enough. Yeah, there's somewhere that I definitely need to check out. But that is basically why they're called the Bock beers. It was basically the Munich people making fun of the Einbeck people's accent, and of course in the Bavarian dialect of German, a Bock is a goat. It's a goat, and that's why you get goats on a lot of these Bock beers actually in Germany. But yeah, as I said, this one really strikes me as kind of somewhere between a Dunkel and a straight up Doppelbock. So straight away with this beer, you've got a really nice kind of sort of brown, almost German rye bready base to this beer. You really pick that up right away. That forms the backbone of the beer, and the brown rye bread really becomes sweeter and sweeter the more that you smell of this beer. There's a lovely bit of a kind of sweet caramel to this one. You've also got some nice McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of things, but at the same time this beer does have a little bit of that really highly caramelised, slightly treacly kind of vibe. It sort of sits on top of the bread and the caramel, and then you've got the biscuity notes in there too. There are one or two little woody undertones to this one, and you've also just got a little bit of a kind of nuttiness to this beer also, which is quite interesting. So yeah, the aroma coming out of this beer, I think, is very, very nice. Really, it really comes across. It's got a mixture. The brown sugars, and this one is quite a bready leaning Bock beer for me, and that's what makes me say it's a little bit more Dunkel-like than Doppelbock. Although it's 7%, it really is more in the kind of Doppelbock region of the spectrum, if you like, when it comes to alcohol content, because normally a Dunkel would be like between 4.5 and 5.5 normally, so this one is more in the region of a Doppelbock rather than anything else, so bear that in mind. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, it is kind of what you would expect. You've got a nice little bit of earthiness to this one, that soft kind of almost German noble type earthiness. There's a little bit of floral aromaticity to the beer, and there's also, breathe that in the wrong there, weird, but yeah, there's also a little bit of that lighter kind of, there's also a little bit of that lighter, how would we say, there's also a little bit of that lighter kind of grassy, kind of noble hop quality coming out of this one. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's Hallertau or Tittnanger or something like that they've used in here. The other option would be Northern Brewer to give you some of these fruity notes that you're getting out of the beer. So let's look at that just now. Let's see what kind of fruity things we're getting out of this one. So yeah, for me, the aroma of this beer is quite, the fruitiness out of this beer. It's got a nice kind of, you do get a bit of cakiness out of this beer and a bit of woodiness that build later on with this one as well, but you do get some nice, how would you say, you do get some kind of blackcurranty, blackberry notes out of this beer. There's a wee bit of a kind of datey, pruny sort of thing. That's coming from the whole cakey vibe that you get, and you also get a little bit of that juicy kind of figgy note in there as well. But for me, it's the kind of cakey notes and the juicy blackcurrant and blackberries that really linger here in this one. So I really like how this goes together. The aroma out of this beer comes across very, very nicely. So yeah, take a little bit of time and mull that over before you get stuck into it, but I have to say I'm very, very curious to see what this one has in store for us. So yeah, let's have a go at this and see how we get on. So yeah, this one is the Texels Bock from Texels Bierbrouwerij in Oudeschild on Texel, the island just out in the western part of the Netherlands, one of the biggest of the Wadden islands there. So yeah, let's get stuck into this one. Slanje, skål, proost. Oh yeah, that's actually a very nice drinkable example of the style. I like this one. That's pretty solid, I have to say. I mean, one of the things we'll say straight away about this beer, if you're a fan of the traditional German styles like I am, you are going to enjoy this one. And you know, it is kind of understandable that when the original brewery founder, when he spent 6 years in Munich, it's quite understandable that he would develop a fondness for things like Doppelbocks and Helles and all of these kind of things. But I have to say, this one comes across really quite nicely actually. This beer has a really, really nice flavour profile to it. And yeah, as I say, if you like me, if you enjoy these different kind of beers, you will enjoy it. I would say that this one, it does have a wee bit more of a kind of Doppelbocky character to it, but there are a few more dunkely elements. Like I was saying in the aroma, the breadiness that this one has gives it a little bit of that dunkely character. So yeah, I mean, it's really quite a straight shooter, this one. It's one of these beers that comes across as really straight shooting and just well crafted. That's my first impression of this one. So let's try and break down the flavour profile of this one then. So you can feel that nice kind of brown bready quality just blanketing the middle of your tongue. And on top of that, you get that really highly caramelised, treacly molasses brown sugar kind of thing there. But the breadiness you have in this beer, it is quite like a wholemeal kind of brown bread. It's got a little bit of that kind of big German rye bread type quality to it as well, though it's not quite as sweet. It does come across as having a little bit of a kind of toasty, a little bit of a sort of toasty element to it as well, which is great. So yeah, the aroma, the flavour, sorry, this one, brain's not working today, and the flavour of this beer is actually very, very nice. It's definitely a very big, oily, brown, sugary leaning beer, and you will notice that this beer develops a little bit of a dryness the further you go into the aftertaste. You do get more of a kind of bread crusty dryness and toasty, brown, sugary dryness out of this beer the further that you go into the aftertaste, which is really nice. But yeah, I really like how that goes together. The backbone of this beer, the big oily brown sugary notes that it has, and the bready base, I think, just goes together very, very well. So if you go to the very centre of your palate, you'll get that nice, very thick, highly caramelised, treacly molasses sort of thing. As you move further out from the centre of your palate, on that middle third of your tongue, you'll feel it just gets a little bit, you feel it becomes a little bit lighter and a more sweet caramel, and then you start to get these biscuity, grainy notes coming out of it too, which is very, very nice. Yeah, it's interesting that. So on the back third of the tongue, you can feel the breadiness is just a little bit thicker, that big brown bready note. You get more of that kind of bread crusty note and a bit more of a kind of toasty graininess there on the very back of the palate as well. But as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, you feel the thickness just goes down a little bit, and then on top of that bready layer, that's where you get those kind of brown sugary notes that I've just talked about there. If you go to the front corners of your palate, then move kind of back diagonally, you will feel a few kind of woody undertones coming out of the beer as well. This one doesn't have some of the nutty things that you can sometimes get out of the style, but I would say this one for me, it is really leaning towards that kind of Doppelbock end of the spectrum, but it does have a few elements of the dunkel, the breadiness, the big kind of bread. It's like the brown sugars in this one are more Doppelbock, but the kind of breadiness that it has is a little bit more kind of dunkel for me. It maybe is fair to say you will find Doppelbocks, of course, that are as bready as this, but I have to say this is a nice example of the style. So probably the next time I go back to the Netherlands, I will see about getting a few of the other beers from these guys, because I'm a big fan of my traditional German beers, and if this is basically a German style brewery, then I would be interested to try more from these guys, so that would be awesome. But yeah, for me, a really nice, it really has the malt base right, and that's the difficult thing to get with these Bock and Doppelbock beers. And remember, these are lagers as well. These are bottom fermenting, cold temperature fermenting beers actually. This is, the Doppelbock is basically a very strong dunkel beer from what I understand. Very similar in flavour profiles actually. But yeah, malty side of this beer is really nicely done. Hoppy side of things then. So it's kind of what you would expect. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. It's that typical kind of smooth, noble earthiness. And as you move further along the side of the palate, you do get a wee touch of a herbal quality there. And as you reach the front corner of the palate, the front corners of the palate, you do get a wee bit of a kind of floral aromaticity. Then round the very front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and more grassy actually, which is quite nice. So yeah, it's typical kind of noble hop quality. This one, from the flavour profile that's coming out of this, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Northern Brewer that's been used in here. I really like how all of that goes together. So yeah, fruity side of things then. As I always say, the fruity part of the beer comes out in that nice oily bubble that you get on at the front third of your palate. If you move towards the back of that front third, you'll feel the borderline between the middle third of your palate and the front third of your palate. It's got a little bit of that cakey, almost toasty edge of a kind of brownie or something like that. You do get a little bit of that cakey edge to this beer, those toasty brown sugars there. And as you move further forward into this one, you will pick up a few almost phenolic-y type elements to this beer, that kind of cough syrupy medicinal type thing. But then yeah, as you move beyond that border region, you start to get the lighter kind of juicy figgy note out of the beer. There is maybe a wee bit of that plummy, kind of slightly more oily plummy quality, but then as you move further forward, as I say, a little bit lighter figgy note, and then on the tip of the tongue there's a bit more of an oily blackcurranty blackberry sort of thing in this one, and it's that lingers into the aftertaste for me. I really find this one leans more towards that blackcurranty blackberry type flavour the further you go into the aftertaste, and some of those more cakey, toasty cakey elements that come out of the beer are sitting in there as well. You really get quite a lot of that out of this beer, in my opinion. But yeah, it's really a very nicely done beer, this one. So thumbs up to Texels Bierbrouwerij for this. I think they've pulled off a really solid beer here. A very kind of it's very bready and very oily. Doppelbock in my mind. It's definitely a Doppelbock. I think it's the more and more I drink of it, the more the more I say that it's Doppelbock rather than having these kind of. It does have a few dunkel elements to it, of course. Some of the way the bready notes come out in this are a bit more dunkel-like, but it's a lovely beer, and we can debate the style all day. So yeah, I'm surprised they haven't just called it like Doppelbock or something like that, because it really is more like a Doppelbock than a single bock. For me, a single bock is always more like a Maibock, like the more kind of blonde bock beers. But yeah, this one I think is a really solid example of the Doppelbock style, and at 7%, it really holds the weight that you expect it to. So let's move on to the mouthfeel then. I think we've covered the flavour profile of this beer quite in depth now. So I would say that this beer is pretty, it's kind of at the bottom end of full-bodied for me. Yeah. Bottom end of full bodied, carbonation is very smooth, it's got a very clean mouthfeel to it, and it's got the level of oiliness that you would expect of a Doppelbock beer. In terms of the bitterness, I think this one is a fairly kind of standard, I think it's maybe about 30, maybe even 40 I would use at a push. You do get a little bit of bitterness from the brown sugary notes. You can feel this one has a bit of a kind of roasty, toasty backbone to it. The more that you drink of it, it really has a roasty, toasty backbone, which I think is quite nice. That suits the beer. But yeah, there's a big kind of smooth breadiness to it. It's got a lovely kind of big oily and toasty brown sugar, a little bit of hoppiness like we said, and also some nice kind of juicy, fruity characters as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting beer, this one, and I think it's been a really interesting one to review here on the channel. So yeah, a very nice example of a Doppelbock, and I always look out for these kind of beers when I go to different countries. Doppelbocks, quadruples and Scotch ales. I love the big malty kind of sweet beers like this. The Scottish Sweet Tooth, of course. But yeah, for me, a very nice beer, this one. I'm glad I was able to review it for you here on the channel. My first encounter with Texels Bierbrouwerij, and hopefully not the last actually. I'd love to review some of the other German style beers from these guys, so we'll see what we can do about that over the next little while. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. A lovely beer, and I do recommend that you try it if, like me, you're a fan of these traditional German beer styles. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Texels Bierbrouwerij. We will return to these guys at some point soon. Make sure you check out my friends in the Dutch Beer Collective. You'll find the link to the Facebook and the Instagram page in the video description below. And as always, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below, and let me know what your favourite beers are from Texels Bierbrouwerij as well. You will see more Dutch reviews coming up quite regularly over the next little while, and this is just a nice one, I think, to kick us off. But thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. The Texels Bock from Texels Bierbrouwerij, a Doppelbock coming in at 7% ABV from Oudeschild. If I pronounced that rightly. How did we say it again? Let me look at the notes. Oudeschild, sorry, Oudeschild on Texel, one of the largest of the Wadden Islands on the Dutch west coast. Slange, Skål, Prost, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Make sure you check out this beer.